everybody, and welcome to the 22nd episode of Fully Endorsed. I am Super DM64, and with me, as always, is Andres Perez. Andres, say hi.
Hello, people of the internet. It is good to be back here. And what are we going to talk about this time around, Dylan?
We are going to be talking about the 1964 film Goldfinger, which is the third in the James Bond franchise produced by Eon Productions, not including some made-for-TV Casino Royale adaptations that technically predate these. This is the third one, all right?
Yeah. These are the ones that count, the good old ones starring the legend himself, Sean Connery.
Yes, the recently deceased Sean Connery.
Right.
Who is most famous for James Bond,
Draco from Dragonheart.
Indiana Jones's Faja. I forget his name. Is it what is his name in that movie? It's is it Henry Jones?
I think
Something
so.
like
I remember because he named the son. He named his son after him, Junior.
Yeah, yeah. He's mostly well known for those roles, as well as beating women. So
and potentially sexually assaulting them.
Listen, the man was 90. He was born literally almost 100 years ago. Let's cut him some slack.
Is that what we're going to say about Bill Cosby as well, Dylan?
I don't think Sean Connery has been accused of anything close to what Bill Cosby
No, that is very true. Bill Cosby is a bit on a higher tier of infamy.
Listen, it may have been socially acceptable at some point to slap a woman around a little bit. Like, that may have been at one point acceptable in society. Drugging them and raping them is a little
That's
bit
a
more.
step too far, you see.
That's where I draw the line.
Right. Plus, the last time Bill Cosby ever tried doing a spy movie, it ended with Leonard Part 6. Remember
Let's
that?
not talk about that. We're here to talk about Goldfinger.
Right.
So, Andres, this is basically your first time really watching a Bond movie. You admit,
Right.
I mean, you say that you saw Thunderball at some point, but don't remember it at all.
Right.
And Die Another Day, I think you said you saw. What a great introduction.
Right. I do have vivid memories of watching Die Another Day, which I believe was the last Pierce Brosnan movie.
I mean, yes, it was. And listen,
yeah.
Die Another Day was, I'm sorry to say it, Die Another Day was my first James Bond movie. I saw that in the theater.
Yeah.
So, when I was a wee lad. So there we are.
Yeah, and
It's
I guess,
just
Pierce Brosnan
unfortunate.
was... Yeah, go
It's
ahead.
just an unfortunate fact of the time in which we were born.
Now, I gotta ask, because Pierce Brosnan was the Bond of our generation, was he generally a good Bond, or was that whole era a good era for Bond mostly, or was it just, mediocre in general?
Well, GoldenEye is a great James Bond movie.
And a great video game.
And a great video game. That's top tier James Bond movie, I gotta say. GoldenEye, really great. Tomorrow Never Dies and World Is Not Enough. They're not bad. They're just sort of middle of the road James Bond. And then you had Die Another Day, which is, of course, famously bad, but it's kind of fun bad. I don't know if you've gone back and revisited that at any point.
Nope.
But it's kind of fun bad in a Batman and Robin sort of way, you know?
Uh-huh. I can see that in that case. The 90s was definitely filled with a lot of that sort of high-octane, very over-the-top level of cheesiness right there that you don't really get these days. Right.
It's James Bond trying to be Mission Impossible. The worst James Bond movies are when James Bond tries to rip off other franchises. You know, in Moonraker, he tried to rip off Star Wars. Another Day, they tried to turn him into Mission Impossible, and in Quantum of Solace, they tried to turn him into Jason Bourne. All three of those examples, I would argue, failed. Although we know somebody who would defend Quantum of Solace. He's not here to defend himself currently, but he's wrong. Anyway.
All of a sudden, his Bond senses were tingling, and he's like, "Wait a minute!"
He shows up all of a sudden.
Yeah, comes in on his parachute.
But yeah, but this is your first time actually really like watching a Bond movie and like
Right.
taking it in, like paying
Yes.
attention to it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, with me and Bond, it's like Bond was always that thing I was aware of, but I just never had the opportunity to get into. But it's definitely one of the, much like Star Trek, pretty much exactly like Star Trek, you know, at the start of this series when we covered Galaxy Quest. It was all, Bond, much like Star Trek, was always one of those things I was exposed to through the pop culture zeitgeist, where every single movie or TV show I had seen always had a reference to Bond here or there. And for me, the closest I ever got to Bond was the Austin Powers series, and I did watch all three of them on, I believe, either on television or through video rental, back when you could do that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I had seen a couple Bond movies, but yeah, I was more familiar with Austin Powers. I saw that when I was entirely too young, and
oh, my parents made sure I did not see Austin Powers until I was at least in high school.
oh no, I saw it much earlier than that, my friend. It shaped me into the man I am today.
Oh, behave. Oh god, that was another thing that was in the pop culture zeitgeist. The yeah, baby. But thankfully, that did not last very long. But it's again, what was it that line from The Sandlot? Something about like people may die, but legends live forever. And
exactly. It's also one of those franchises where like every few years you hear them. Mike Myers will come out of the woodwork and say something about like, "Hey, we might do an Austin Powers 4."
right.
And I'm like. At this point, I'm like, well, shit or get off the pot. Like, fucking.
There's a ton of that going on in Hollywood. I mean, we were just talking right now about, like, the Toxic Avenger with Peter Dinklage getting casted. It's like, hasn't that movie been, like, development hell for, like, 10 years or so right now at this point?
Well, you know, for like 30 years now, Mel Brooks has been like, I could do a Spaceballs 2.
Right, or Space Jam 2.
If Rick Moranis would sign on, or you know, maybe he will now. You know, he's getting mugged in New York. Maybe he needs the money.
or he needs money to pay those medical bills. What was it? There was like all the talk about Ghostbusters 3 and all that shit.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's
finally sort of happening. Was supposed to have already happened. Thanks, COVID.
Right. Yeah, thanks to COVID. Yeah, we're gonna have to. These development hell movies are gonna be stuck there even longer. But anyways,
including the 25th James Bond film, No Time to Die, I believe it's called. So, segue. But yeah, your first time really paying attention and watching a Bond movie. So what were your general thoughts, not just about this film, but about this franchise? What do you think?
It's definitely, it's kind of like almost like a revelation sort of experience the same experience, revelatory experience.
You've seen the face of God.
It's like watching Enter the Dragon, where that was a big pop culture sensation that has since been parodied and homaged numerous times across history. And so pretty much all the staples, as you've stated while we were watching the movie, all the staples, the classic staples of James Bond, be it like the Aston Martin, the Shaken Not Stirred, Bond, James Bond, I Expect You to Die, all those like iconic lines are all pretty much, this was like the movie that I feel like that. I don't know, like you can tell me what the relationship this movie or the contributions this movie gave to the franchise, but I felt like while the other two movies I'm assuming were the ones that sort of kickstarted the franchise, this was the one that sort of solidified the formula, or at least like solidified the pop culture image of James Bond that people came to know and love, and that anytime people
absolutely. This movie definitely set the formula in stone, because the first two movies, and this is why there was kind of a debate when I was trying to decide which James Bond movie to show you. I wasn't sure if I wanted to start with Dr. No, since that's the first one, or jump to Goldfinger, and ultimately we decided on Goldfinger. And I think it was a good thing, honestly, because Dr. No is very prototypical. It's definitely, they're making a James Bond movie for the first time, and they're sort of figuring this stuff out as they go along. And then From Russia with Love, the second movie, is sort of atypical in that it sort of subverts the formula in some very interesting ways. The third movie, Goldfinger, this is the formula. This is the standard sort of James Bond formula moving on from this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
with variations here and there.
Right.
But for the most part, it's like this is what people came to expect from a James Bond movie.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like in a way where you look at the Godzilla franchise, where Godzilla 54 is a classic. All you know, it's in a league. It's in a league of its own. But it's like it definitely set the standard for what to expect out of a Godzilla movie. But then it's like Godzilla Raids Again was sort of experimental in terms of how to approach the giant monster battle formula. And then by the time you can make the argument that it was either King Kong versus Godzilla or Mothra versus Godzilla that then solidified Godzilla's stance in Japanese and international pop culture.
I would argue Mothra versus Godzilla. Also 1964, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Because King Kong versus Godzilla is like a satire, and it still feels it still feels kind of prototypey. I think Mothra versus Godzilla is really the one that solidifies, like, hey, this is what this franchise is going to be from now until 84.
Right.
So strap in.
yeah, it definitely has that very sort of not tongue in cheek, but very like not self-serious at the same time, but more like fantastical tone. That it's like fantastical, serious tone that the rest of the franchise would cover, at least up until the 70s, where things got a lot goofier.
Yeah, I think you just nailed it. It's a matter of tone.
Mm-hmm.
Mothra versus Godzilla really establishes the tone that the majority of the franchise has, because everything prior to that was either darker than this or sillier. In the case of King Kong versus Godzilla, they struck a balance that sort of carried on throughout the rest of the Showa period and even into Heisei.
And how
why are we discussing the history of Godzilla now?
Well, that's the thing. You and I, as well as our buddy Bill and like other people, have made numerous connections between Godzilla and James Bond over the years, given how these are two long-standing franchises with potentially like the most movies in their repertoire. And
I watched recently. There's a YouTube channel that specializes mostly in horror that some people might have heard of. You might have heard of it. I don't know, called Dead Meat.
Yeah.
They recently had D-Man on their podcast, which was really weird for me because they had him on their podcast. They posted like a couple of days after we posted him on our podcast. It was so strange.
Yeah. We shared a guest with a YouTube channel that's considerably significantly bigger than ours.
Oh yeah, and more talented. But even the reason they had him on is that they were reviewing the original Godzilla, and they did a little bit of talk about the franchise in general, and even they drew the Bond comparison. So I mean, I think it's a pretty common thing, mostly because they're both films with 20 plus entries.
Right. And they've also like followed trends. Oftentimes they either set trends or chased after trends, and gone through several reboots and reinventions over the years. So it feels like as Godzilla fans, we can't help but make comparisons to Goldfinger, especially to our fans who are mostly like Godzilla kaiju fans out there. Now, in terms of the James Bond franchise, how would you describe the tone that this film set for the rest of the franchise?
It isn't so much a matter of tone, because I feel like the tone was already pretty well established by the first two films.
Okay.
It's more so just a matter of nailing down the formula, the basic template, if you will. The pre-credit scene that is only sort of tangentially related to the plot.
With the psychedelic visuals.
The stuff about the stuff in London. This is the first of the franchise where you actually see James Bond go to Q Branch and see the weapons being developed, and that's or then the gadgets, and that's like a thing that happens several times over the course of the franchise.
Right. That's a thing that's definitely a thing that's been parodied over the years. Like, this is a little thing that it may look like an ordinary pen, but it's actually a laser shooter. And
that's maybe the biggest contribution of Goldfinger to this franchise, honestly, is the reliance on gadgets. Gadgets were around in the first two movies, but they were not nearly as over the top or as prominently featured. James Bond, for the most part, in the first two films, relies on his wits and his gun. And occasionally gadgets. The big gadget in From Russia with Love was a briefcase that had like a gas canister trap set in it, and so he was able to trick the villain into opening it and get like gas to the face, and like that was the big gadget for that movie. And then you come to this movie and he's got, you know, a freaking Aston Martin with like machine guns in it, and then you go from this to the next movie, he has a jetpack. Like
nice.
So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that this gave to the franchise is gadgets. Just the reliance on gadgets, the prominence of gadgets. It makes Q a much more important character in the franchise because he's the guy who has all the gadgets.
Right.
Yeah, if there was one specific like thing that I had to point to as like that's what Goldfinger really gave to the franchise, I would say it's the gadgets. Also the women with funny names trope.
Yes.
all begins here with Miss Pussy Galore.
Right. I must be dreaming.
I must be dreaming.
Yeah. In that case, yeah, it's pretty shocking to hear that, but it kind of makes sense. Like 3 movies in, they established the sort of almost pseudo sci-fi world of James Bond. And it's like the weird thing is, like, I'm very hesitant on calling it sci-fi because it doesn't really feel sci-fi enough to call it sci-fi. And
right, it's only sort of sci-fi. It's like it's not
sci-fi.
It's not that far ahead of where we are in the real world in terms of technology. Well, I say that. I mean, until we get to like Moonraker, then shit goes off the rails. But you know, for the most part, James Bond is in a slightly heightened reality,
right? Where
like the technology is a little bit crazier and more out there than what we have in real life, but not by like a long shot. You know, not to the point where it's ever like super unbelievable.
Right, and the funny thing is, it's now super believable, actually, because now we kind of essentially have all this technology at our disposal.
Right.
Like the little device that Bond puts in his car that the guys that his like allies try to track down. That's essentially kind of like when you turn on the what do you call it, the sort of locator on your cell phone so you can find out where your cell phone is via GPS. Or the entire GPS.
They essentially invented GPS for this movie.
Right, yeah. The whole like little flip out screen, radar screen that pops out of the Aston Martin. That's like, yeah, we have those now. Right. And who knows? And like, I guess you could put machine guns if you're a crazy enough person to add to your car, and like little oil slick spilling devices in the back.
I really feel like this Aston Martin influenced every like pop culture like gadget car that came after this.
Like the
any
Mach
version
5,
of the Batmobile,
the Batmobile,
any version of the Batmobile,
right?
Is after this, you know, all of that. I mean, how common is the ejector seat as like a feature on those type of pop culture cars?
Oh yeah,
and it comes back to this movie. It's like a big thing. Q's like, don't press this button or you'll engage the passenger ejector seat. And he goes, ejector seat? You must be kidding. And Q just looks at him and goes, I never joke about my work, 007.
That was a great line. And I love it. I love it. It's like you introduce...
Especially later on in the franchise, Q gets real sassy, and it's great.
And it's a really great, the sort of establishment of Q explaining to him all these little devices that may seem random, but eventually come back into the plot to help Bond in various ways. It's a great way of pulling off the, I believe you call it the Chekhov's gun trope, where you establish something early on so that it doesn't feel like it comes out of left field when you reintroduce it later on in the story.
Right. You have Q in the beginning of the movie say, this cufflink is also a missile launcher, so that later on you can have him fucking shoot something with this cufflink. You know, it's just tight script writing. It's tight storytelling.
Yeah, and it's like, The next thing I wanted to bring up was with Bond himself, and after growing up in this sort of, I don't know, I know a lot of people liked Skyfall, but it's like, for me, I was never interested in this sort of dry interpretation of James Bond. Like, I might have caught, anytime I see clips or trailers featuring the Daniel Craig version of Bond in the, what is it now, 3 or 4 movies that he's been in at this point, it never captivated me at all whatsoever. I'm sure there is an interesting character that Daniel Craig is portraying, but it's not something that interests me. Yet, seeing Sean Connery's original take on Bond, I was so shocked at how joyful and how sassy and how much this guy just loves to like fuck with other people. This guy's like Bugs Bunny in a way. In terms of how much he loves annoying the shit out of people, and I love it. It's like, he's, oh my god, yeah,
he's very witty and mischievous. I love this the golfing scene where he's just fucking with Goldfinger.
Yeah. Ain't I a stinker?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the reason Skyfall is my favorite of the Daniel Craig movies is that it's the most like that. It's the closest he ever gets to that. But yeah, for the most part, you want your James Bond to, have a little bit of a wink in them, you're
a little mischievous.
Yeah, and they've all got that, to varying degrees. It's like an integral part of the character. But you have to remember that Casino Royale came out in either 2005 or 2006. I get it mixed up all the time, and so it was very much still in this same era of Dark Knight Batman.
Yeah, and the Bourne movies.
It's like everything's got to be grim and realistic and super gritty, dork. And then
2006, that's when it came out.
Yeah, so it's definitely a part of that era of filmmaking that has just sort of survived into the modern day. And now in this post-MCU world, I really want the next version of James Bond to just be like, fuck it, we're going right back into what makes Bond Bond. Let's go crazy.
And wouldn't it be crazy, even more crazier, if they decide to make the next iteration of Bond a period piece?
I would love some Bond stuff that's set back in the 60s, because Bond really works well in the Cold War era. Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I don't know if they'll do that, but I would love it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was definitely a crazy time back in the Cold War. So, it was certainly the best period for espionage storytelling to work. And I guess espionage stories or spy thrillers can work no matter what situation you're in. No matter what I mean by that is no matter what decade you're in, there's always a sense of timelessness to spy thrillers. I do remember growing up, there were often a lot of spy parodies back in the day. I think there was a movie called The Tuxedo that had Jackie Chan in a high-tech tuxedo that would help him do kung fu or whatever. Or maybe
look at Spy Kids.
Spy Kids, yes. Oh my God, you're right. Spy Kids was a whole entire franchise that tried to bring the awesomeness of James Bond for a younger audience. And
what they're making fun of in that movie is sort of what the spy genre became. Because you look back at Dr. No, and Dr. No is remarkably grounded compared to this, or certainly any of the things that came after this, and it sort of morphed into this more outlandish thing as time went on, to the point where the movie idea of what a spy is so far removed from what an actual spy is.
Right. It's not so much about sneaking into places and getting information and then passing that information along. No, rather it's just going in and blowing up the bad guy in their secret hideout on a deserted island.
It's like when you grow up as a kid watching movies about ninjas, and then you do research when you grow up and you realize, oh, the ninjas as I knew them don't really exist. Ever. They didn't pull off magic jutsu moves. The whole uniform, the whole ninja uniform that you associate with ninjas, is totally fictional.
Right, they don't dress in black. They actually dress in blue to hide better in the blue starlit sky.
I mean, they were basically just like modern day spies who were operating in feudal Japan. Like they just wore whatever they needed to wear to maintain their cover. They didn't run around in like the black uniform with a katana fucking assassinating people.
Right.
Like,
you mean to tell me all those Pierre Kirby movies were a lie, Dylan?
yes.
All those Godfrey Ho movies were nothing but shams?
Yes. I mean, Back to the Future is a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
But yeah, that's sort of the same thing with spies. There's this movie idea of like what a spy is, and it's so far removed from what spy work is in the real world that it's kind of hilarious. And I think that's why parodying that genre became so popular when we were younger.
Right. Before it eventually kind of like overstayed its welcome, and people kind of got sick of parodies. It almost became a trope in animated movies, especially, where it's like, if you want to make a sequel and you don't know what story to tell, just make it a spy thriller. And there's no better example than Cars 2.
Oh, Jesus. At the same time, non-parody spy movies just, they combated this problem by becoming much more realistic. And that's where you get your Jason Bournes and your Daniel Craig Bonds, in this sort of post 9/11 world,
where the world suddenly got a lot more serious and scary.
Yes.
And now, at that point, it was all about fighting terrorists.
Exactly.
And that was the sort of thing that Team America eventually parodied itself. So even that got parodied.
Yeah, it's a never-ending snake eating its own tail.
Yeah. By the way, one last thing I forgot to mention that's also very Bond-inspired: The Incredibles. I would argue.
Oh, yeah,
very Bond-esque.
Lots of movies have this in their DNA. I mean, the James Bond films were a big hit in Japan, and you can certainly see that in Godzilla movies of the 70s.
You're right. Yeah, a lot, like Mechagodzilla itself feels like a very strong like spy thriller in certain aspects involving the Interpol agent. Other films and genres have borrowed this sort of show. One of the things I love about X-Men First Class, that movie, it feels very Bond to me. Oh yeah, that's true. And even
it's set in the 60s. It's got that sort of like spy thriller kind of feel to it. Even though it's a superhero movie, it's the movie that made me say Michael Fassbender should play James Bond, and I stand by that. I don't care how old he is. Fucking, he still looks young enough. Fucking put him out there. I don't care. He can do the fingering. But the gold fingering. So I guess let's start. We should start getting into the specifics on the movie itself here. Oh, you were also introduced, of course, to the sort of recurring side characters of the James Bond universe.
Right.
We already talked about Q a little bit, but there's also M, the guy who's in charge. There's Miss Moneypenny.
Yes, Moneypenny. I've definitely heard of M and Moneypenny before. I've heard of Q, and it was definitely very nice to actually see like the original iterations of these characters. Now, and then you were also introduced to James Bond's CIA counterpart, Felix Slider, who is not as well known in sort of the general pop culture zeitgeist, but James Bond fans are very familiar with him because he is heavily featured in the franchise. He's been there since Dr. No, and he pops up periodically throughout the James Bond franchise to help James on his cases, especially whenever America is involved. Almost always played by a different actor. Now, was that like an in-joke after the third actor came in?
Eventually, they did get one guy who played the character for a while. There might have even been a couple guys who sort of held on to the role for a while. But in these early films, it's always a different dude.
Right.
He's in Thunderball, and it's a different guy than here in Goldfinger, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, then. But yeah, a lot of these characters, they have really good, a very good repertoire with Bond. They have very good chemistry with each other. And I especially love the interactions. What very little we have, I do definitely love the exchanges between Bond and Moneypenny. They seem like they definitely got a thing going on there. And you mentioned to me that while we were watching it, that they definitely have sort of like a will they, won't they, on again, off again type of playful flirting / romance with each other that doesn't really go anywhere, unfortunately, but it's still it's very nice to see Bond have like a consistent female companion throughout his journey, throughout his adventures, because given that the series is infamous for just kind of like swapping out Bond girls with no explanation as to what happens to them afterwards.
Yeah. Moneypenny is the one Bond girl who stays there all the time.
So that was pleasantly surprised to learn about that.
And the great thing about those three characters is that for the most part, they're usually played by the same people. The guy who plays M, the girl who plays Moneypenny, they both stuck around for a very long time until they were eventually replaced just because of age. The guy who played Q, Desmond Llewellyn, he stayed around until the Pierce Brosnan era.
Wow, okay.
And in fact, when he retired, they wrote it into the script. They brought in a new guy who took over the Q role. So they didn't even recast Desmond Llewellyn. They had Desmond Llewellyn train his replacement.
That is really cool to hear about. Because I guess some people might think that, like Godzilla, Bond has had multiple reboots, but that's not really the case. He only ever had the one reboot with Casino Royale for the Daniel Craig era.
Let me just stop right now to rant.
Okay.
About the fucking James Bond codename theory.
The platform is yours.
Jesus fucking Christ. Whoever came up with this bullshit has never paid attention to these fucking movies. I'm not convinced they've ever watched them. The theory, if you're not aware, people, is that the reason James Bond is constantly being recast is that James Bond is actually a code name, and these are all actually different spies. No, absolutely not. First of all, events from one James Bond's movies are brought up again in later movies. Famously, on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Bond marries. He meets the love of his life, Tracy. He marries her. She becomes Tracy Bond, and then she gets murdered. It's very sad. It's a great scene. They kind of ruin it because it's like this really somber moment, and then it's like quiet for a minute, and you think, oh, we're gonna quietly fade into credits, and then the James Bond music comes in and goes, da-na-da-da. I just recently rewatched that one, and I couldn't help laugh a little bit at that point. Which is unfortunate because the dude's wife just died, and he gives in that moment like one of the best performances in any James Bond movie. That's George Lazenby, his one movie. He gives like this amazing performance in that moment, and then it's like quiet, and the Bond theme just comes in. Da-da-da. But anyway, she dies in that movie. In the very next movie, Lazenby left for reasons. It's complicated. And they had to bring back Sean Connery for one movie. Sean Connery is hunting Blofeld because Blofeld killed his wife in the last movie. Now, clearly, these two Bonds are the same person. Fast forward, even later on, the fact that Bond used to have a wife and that she was murdered gets brought up again later on in I believe in one of the Roger Moore movies. This is a consistent thing. The continuity is set. Now, it's got that weird sort of floating timeline thing that happens with franchises that have been around this long.
Like with Marvel and DC continuity? Exactly.
Where it's like, oh, we're in the 90s now, but all that stuff still happened, just more recently. It still does that, and that's why I think eventually a reboot was inevitable. But all of the original five, all of the original five Bonds are definitely the same person. Put that to bed right now.
Now, what if, Dylan, hear me out here, James Bond...
He's not a Time Lord.
Damn it! I know we actually joked about that on SOS years back.
But you know who is a Time Lord?
Who?
Scooby-Doo, and I'll tell you why. In episode 2 or 3 of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, they go inside his doghouse, and it's a fucking mansion in there. Now, how does that work? Obviously, Scooby-Doo's his doghouse is a TARDIS.
Ruh-oh! It's the Rawrix, Raggy!
This is canon. Okay.
Depending on what kind of canon, because according to the Scoob movie, the pup named Scooby-Doo never really actually happened that way.
Let's not bring shit into this. Let's not. What are you doing?
It's all about continuity, man. It's all about tying everything together and cleaning up loose ends, because continuity mistakes and stuff like that are just bad, and they can't exist. Everything's got to be explained through in-universe lore.
But you know what is in continuity with A Pup Named Scooby-Doo?
What is?
Is What's New Scooby-Doo, because in the first season episode where they're on the golf course and they're being chased by the giant robot clown, there is a flashback to Velma being traumatized by a clown when she was a child, and they used the A Pup Named Scooby-Doo character models.
Wow, I had no idea that was a thing.
Yes.
But that is cool.
If there are 3 things I know on this planet, it's Godzilla, James Bond, and Scooby-Doo.
I see then. Are you proud of yourself, Dylan? Anyway, back to Bond. So yeah, in terms of the character of Bond, I really love Sean Connery's performance. I absolutely see why he became the legend that he was, and why Bond has been such a dearly beloved character to this very day. That has kind of, I wouldn't say stood the test of time, only because like there's definitely very misogynistic undertones with his character, but at the same time,
I don't know what you mean.
At the same time, you can make the argument that he's human. He has flaws like all of us. He's not a perfect altruistic Superman of a human being.
Grace, you're not allowed to be a human in 2020.
I guess it's the idea where it's like, I do not condone his treatment of women, but it is entertaining regardless. It's like, hey, it's like...
Listen, Andres, sometimes you just gotta slap a woman, you understand?
Remember, 50 no's and a yes means yes.
You never use a closed fist, use an open palm, you see. And it's very...
I will say, it's so funny seeing that for lack of a better term, the rape scene, because it's like, I had that moment like that if you remember Red Letter Media, they were watching the How to Hypnotize People video on Best of the Worst, Wheel of the Worst, and they're like, oh god, it is a rape tape! I saw that, at first I'm thinking, you know what, I'm pretty sure the whole misogynistic stuff, I'm pretty sure that's over-exaggerated. Oh my god, he is a rapist!
But it's also important to remember that this was a trope in classic Hollywood.
Uh-huh.
This James Bond is not alone in this. There's a trope of this scene where it's supposed to portray like that sort of sexual tension where like two people are like bickering and then all of a sudden they start making out, which is fine, but it tends to get a little.
So essentially, she was asking for it. That's what happened.
No, what I'm saying is.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Nowadays, the scene would just be them arguing and then they start kissing.
That's what I'm used to seeing these days, yeah.
But back then, it had a tendency to get a little more physical.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it was as simple as, like, the man would grab them by the arms.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you listen here. And other times...
You're gonna fuck me and you're gonna fuck me well.
And other times, Pussy Galore and James Bond have a judo match in the hay, and then he pins her down like a Greco-Roman wrestler and starts making out with her.
Uh-huh.
You gotta understand that these are just the trends of the time.
I understand that it was a different time.
It's a different time, different place. I mean, as late as Blade Runner, this sort of thing was happening, so you know.
Uh-huh. I do wonder if women found this interesting as much as men in that time period.
I don't know. It's a good question.
That's what I want to know.
I mean,
Can you show me?
I mean, you know, I mean, the standards have moved, so I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I honestly
These were women of that same time period, so some of them were probably very much against it because they were like feminists or whatever, and they wanted to change the way things were. Whereas other women of the period would have been like, "I'm fine with the status quo." I mean, that's sort of the range of human experience.
Yeah. Or it's like,
the important thing you got to remember
I'm fine
is
with
that
this. Yeah, go ahead.
It's 1964. People weren't pussies back then, and it's just except for Pussy Galore, and it was just a different time.
I definitely understand that, and like this is definitely a case where cultural and historical context is key before going into this piece of film from 1964. You can't expect everything to be up to date with this, and like, I don't know, I guess like, people can make the argument that James Bond's behavior is, you can definitely say that his behavior is a reflection of the times, and but to make the argument that like James Bond as a franchise is bad because it promotes this sort of behavior towards women, I'm not so sure about that, only because it's like, for me, I'm going into this aware of the fact that it's not good to treat women like this in real life. So to see this in the film, it's like, it's not going to make me suddenly turn me into a sexist pig or whatever.
Well, and the films have also evolved with the times. You look at, Daniel Craig doesn't do this sort of thing now in movies.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's evolved as time has gone on. Obviously.
Yeah. So, like, while admittedly it does make me feel uncomfortable as an audience, as a viewer in 2020, looking at a movie in 1964, that's just like an inherent part of going into any movie. There, it's like, I'm not gonna want to cancel this movie for being a product of its time. Rather, I watch the movie. You have to sort of detach yourself from your emotions in that instance, and look at it through an objective lens. Right. Kind of like going into King Kong, and there's certainly some racist overtones in there. And it's like,
black man been here.
So it's like, as long as I acknowledge that what's happening in the movie is happening, before my eyes, and I'm aware that the times have changed and we've improved, and I want to say that I'm not like that how people were back then. It's like I can still come to terms with the outdatedness of a particular piece of media while still enjoying it for what it is. And yeah, that's definitely,
it's also it's also like 2 minutes out of an hour out of a 2 hour.
Right. I was about to mention that it's just one single moment out of the entire movie. Now, in terms of the portrayal of Asians in this movie, I don't know about that, but
well, you have to remember, you see, that of course China was an enemy at the time.
In other words, China bad.
This is during the Cold War.
Yep.
They were dirty commies.
You can argue they still are. What? Who said that?
Pinko scum. And
oh, shit. No, I do not hate China. Just don't cancel. Don't. Shit, it's already happened.
I would argue the only Chinese character who's portrayed sort of in an odd way is Odd Job. Because, at least all the other Chinese guys, they have agency, like they seem like they're people, Odd Job is just like this big hulking monster who doesn't even seem to know any English. He occasionally just goes, ah.
I kept thinking, what the hell is up with Odd Job? Like, he doesn't even speak any sort of language whatsoever, and apparently, I just checked on Wikipedia, his character is supposed to be Korean, but he's played by a Japanese man, so... yeah. But anyways, like, I would say Odd Job is at least, like, a very intimidating, very, truly memorable character. And like, even
he also kind of establishes a trope in James Bond, and this isn't one that shows up in every movie, but oftentimes you will have a henchman who is just like this huge hulking,
the muscle essentially,
gorilla.
Yeah.
The two biggest examples being Odd Job and Jaws from Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm. And it's even as someone who has very little experience with Bond, I definitely have seen like Odd Job appear throughout pop culture, and of course, who could forget his illustrious appearance in the animated series James Bond Jr., where he dressed up as MC Hammer.
I knew you were going to bring this up eventually.
I showed this to Dylan right after we watched Goldfinger, and he was just mortified.
I don't think we can do this podcast anymore.
But yeah, it's very bizarre that he doesn't speak at all. He just like squawks occasionally just to get people's attention.
He only does it like twice in the whole movie, though.
Yeah,
for the most part,
it's so distracting because like people don't act that way unless he got his like tongue snipped out or something.
Yeah, his whole thing with the hat is also really weird.
Yeah, at first I thought it was like that one character from Mortal Kombat where he has the big hat that's like a razor blade, but no, apparently it looks like there's one point where you see the underside of it, and it has like a big metal ring inside. So I'm assuming it's just made out of a really hard metal that's capable of like breaking people's necks.
Yeah, I think that's the idea. It's just really strange. I wonder how they came up with that. I wonder if it was in the book. I haven't read any of the books, so I don't know how much of this is accurate or not. I know that the order is all different. Casino Royale is the first book. Goldfinger is the 9th book. Like, the order is very different.
Oh, okay. So here's...
Or actually, 7th. Goldfinger is the 7th book.
Here's a description on the Wikipedia page. Oddjob's signature weapon is a razor-edged bowler hat, which he wears at all times and can throw with deadly accuracy. He's also a skilled archer, able to fire an arrow through a ring as it is held aloft. Due to a cleft palate, he has a speech defect that renders his speech unintelligible to everyone except Goldfinger.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
Well, now we're offending the cleft palate community, so...
Oh, boy. That's okay. Thankfully, it pays to be a nobody on the internet.
Yes.
So...
You can't cancel us. Nobody's watching anyway.
So... With all of that, the name Oddjob, it works in terms of his position under Goldfinger, as well as just him being a very odd and dangerous and perplexing character. You don't know much about him, but it's that aura of mystique around him that makes him all the more intimidating as a villain. And they built him up wonderfully throughout this movie. Especially like when he first shows off his hat like decapitating a statue, him crushing a golf ball with his bare hands, and like you see he's always there. He's kind of like the shark. Ironically, he is like the shark from Jaws, where he's always around. He's gonna shit's gonna go down eventually between him and Bond, and when it happens, it is like a real spectacle to see, because it's always cool to see James Bond sort of like outwit his opponents. Whereas when it comes to the regular henchmen, he can easily kick their asses through whatever martial arts he uses. But when it comes to someone who can overpower him, that's when he's got to use his surroundings to his advantage.
Yes, it's a lot like Indiana Jones having to fight that one big Nazi, and then just him getting caught in the plane propeller.
Right.
Or the big thuggy who gets caught in the rolly thingy in the mine.
I remember that.
Or the other big Nazi. You get the idea.
Yeah, who gets run over by a tank.
Yes. Or the big Russian who I think got eaten by fire ants.
Yep.
But that movie didn't happen. Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, the first time we see Oddjob is only in silhouette, and this is one of the Goldfinger is packed with like super iconic scenes, and the first one in particular is when James Bond is in the hotel room with I believe her name was Julie Masterson.
Let's see. Looking down here.
The last name is definitely Masterson. There were two of them. There was the one from the hotel, and then the sister that he meets later, who's trying to kill Goldfinger.
Right. Let's see. Jill Masterson, and the sister was Tilly Masterson.
Okay, Jill. I was close. So when he's in the hotel room with Jill Masterson, he goes into the sort of like little kitchenette area to get a drink, I think, and he gets knocked out from behind. We see Oddjob's silhouette, and this is followed up by the famous scene of him waking up and finding her painted gold.
Much like how you were wondering when I was going to bring up cartoon Oddjob, I was wondering when you were going to bring up Goldmember.
I love gold. Yes. That was a very interesting method of death.
Yeah. Although according to Wikipedia, you can't actually die from that. So I don't know who to believe at this point, but it was certainly a very interesting one, because I've seen, much like a lot of James Bond iconography, I've seen the image of Jill Masterson's dead golden body, like splayed, lay across the bed. And I was wondering,
and out of context, she must have just been like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I was like, is she a golden statue or something? Did they pull a Medusa on her or something?
Is the villain Midas?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know. It's like, did Goldfinger have Midas powers? But no,
he's got the Midas touch, but he touched it too much. Hey, Goldmember.
But especially the song doesn't help matters either.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny thing about this movie that I've always joked about, is that the song at the beginning, I love it, by the way. It's one of the best James Bond.
I've listened to this song multiple times, even without watching the movie, like years before this moment.
Yeah, it's super iconic. It's one of the best. It's performed by the great Shirley Bassey. I actually have to correct myself, Andres. When we were watching the movie, I told you that she had done 2 Bond themes. In reality, I remembered she actually did 3. Oh. She did Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever, and Moonraker.
Okay.
And only one of those movies deserved her talents. But yeah, it's a great theme song. But the lyrics of the song paint this picture of Goldfinger as this like seductor who like lures women.
Right, it's the kiss of death from Mr. Goldfinger. Wop, wop,
and then you see him in the movie, and he's like fat,
schlubby.
He's a fat old white dude who is from England, I think, but he's like, he has this weird like almost Germanic accent.
Right. Also, apparently that's not his real voice. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, the person who played Goldfinger, he spoke little English, he said his lines phonetically, but was too slow. To redub him, he had to double the speed of his performance to get the right tempo. The only time his real voice is heard is during his meeting with the members of the Mafia. Bond is when Bond is hidden below the model of Fort Knox. His natural voice can be heard above. However, he was redubbed for the rest of the film by stage actor Michael Collins.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's a great scene. That's a great scene too, where he's kind of laying out his plan to all those guys. That's a classic spy movie trope again, being laid out here in Goldfinger. Mm-hmm. That speech he has, where he's like, "Man has gone to the moon," and blah blah blah, and we've not gone to the moon, shot rockets to the moon. This was pre-1969, after all. Mm-hmm. And he says, "Man has achieved wonders in every area of human endeavor, except crime."
I like that.
Oh shit! I'm like, oh shit! This man just went all Lex Luthor on us.
Right. So yeah, going into Goldfinger, yeah, he's definitely someone who it's one of those things where it's like appearances can be deceiving. Which is the opposite of someone like Oddjob. Where Oddjob, you see him, he has a very intimidating presence. Whilst with Goldfinger, it's mainly his wealth and power and his connections that are the real threat to Bond and the world and, the US as a whole. This guy has made, it's established this guy's made connections with criminals all over the world. And, as a little bit convoluted as his scheme was, it kind of makes sense. And there's like a neat twist to his plans, where at first you think, oh, he's just obsessed with gold and he wants to rob the U.S. Fort Knox of its gold. But no, it turns out he wants to destroy the gold so that he can make his gold more valuable, making him more powerful in the long run.
Yeah, because as James Bond points out to him, it would take entirely too long to get the gold out of Fort Knox, even if you can break in.
Mm-hmm.
It would take, I think he said, 200 men, 6 days to load it onto 12 trucks or something like that.
Right.
And, meanwhile, he would have like maybe a couple minutes before the army comes in and makes him put it back. And it's a great scene. It's a great scene where Goldfinger, because Goldfinger doesn't come out and tell him the plan.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of like drops hints and lets James Bond work it out for himself. It's such a great scene, and it's like they're at this table drinking mint juleps because they're in Kentucky, and it's just such an engaging way of revealing the plan, as opposed to what they did in a lot of other movies, and what Austin Powers sort of parodied later on, where the villain is like, and now I will tell you my entire plan. It's like, it's so much more interesting the way that they lay it out in this film.
Yeah. And speaking of like avoiding the thing that would later become mocked and parodied, is the idea of like leaving Bond to die while giving him the chance to escape. I mean, they plan to leave him for dead at Fort Knox before that bomb goes off, but funny enough, they never get the chance to leave him behind, because at that point, that's when Pussy Galore ends up betraying Goldfinger and helping Bond escape, eventually, fight his way out. And
well, and there's also the famous laser trap, which is maybe the most famous scene from the movie.
Right.
As soon as we cut to him strapped to that table, you're like, "Is this the thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's the thing." What I love about that is that Bond can't get out of that trap.
Yeah,
he would have died. The only way he gets out is by convincing Goldfinger that he's more valuable to him alive.
Right.
But there's no physical way of him like breaking out of that trap or like MacGyvering his way out of that situation.
Yeah.
It's purely a matter of his wits.
Right.
He has to plead his case and like convince them not to kill him, because he is completely screwed in that situation.
Right. He essentially had to bullshit his way out, and that's what makes Bond such a captivating character, that you put him... This movie puts him through a lot of situations, and he manages to get out through the skin of his teeth. He's not exactly perfect, but he's definitely more than capable of dealing with any situation that he's in, and that's what makes him so compelling as a character. He's so... on top of just being so awesome so badass to watch him go about kicking ass, but he's also just a very inherently charming, likable character, flaws and all.
Yeah, it would also be remiss of us not to mention perhaps the most famous line in James Bond history, which comes from that scene where James Bond says, "You expect me to talk?" And Goldfinger says, "No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die." It's great.
Absolutely, yeah. Let's see. If there's one thing, Mark, against this movie, I would say, is that I feel like Jill Masterson's sister feels kind of pointless in the long run, because like with Jill dying, she sets up a good precedent to show how powerful of a character, how influential and powerful of a character Goldfinger is when he can make a person die just like that. But with Tilly Masterson, she was there, and it felt like she was going to be the Bond girl to help James Bond with... I like the twist where when they first establish her, they make her appear to be an assassin for hire for Goldfinger, when the twist is that she was going after Goldfinger herself for revenge because of the murder of her sister. But then, like, the moment that's revealed...
You think she was shooting at Bond, but in reality she was shooting at Goldfinger, and she just sucks at shooting.
Right. But like the moment she reveals herself, she reveals herself to Bond, she's quickly disposed of and killed by Oddjob. So I thought, what was the point of all of that to begin with?
Well, if this movie had been written today, she definitely would have stuck around to the end, right? She would have like got the final killing blow against Goldfinger.
Right. That would be her whole entire character arc, is getting like vengeance for her sister. And like the thing she would blow out the window and like suck Goldfinger out into space and probably die in the process. But right before doing it, she would say some badass line, right? Like that would be how they would do it. Right.
I feel like the idea, and again, I don't know if this is from the book or not.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the idea is to show that this woman was completely out of her head. She was just, clearly she doesn't know how to shoot a gun.
Mm-hmm.
She's just a chick who finds out that her sister has been murdered and like tries to take down this international criminal, this gold smuggler with like China connections. Like, she's in way over her head and she gets herself killed.
And I suppose it's like they want to show off Oddjob's ability to actually kill someone, and that's really the only person we see him kill outside of that one dude whose body gets crushed in that that junkyard. Right.
Yeah, he shoots him.
But even then, you need. I guess the writer said, "Oh, we got to show him killing someone with that hat at least once to establish the threat of that hat when he eventually goes toe to toe with Bond."
Yeah, it's also kind of a payoff because they showed him use the hat on that statue earlier. And then when we see it hit her in the neck, it's like we instantly know, like, ooh,
yeah. But
she did.
But I guess usually you would use that opportunity on like a no-name character before you go after a named character, and I guess they treated Tilly as the no-name character.
Yeah, I think maybe it was just supposed to be like this tragic turn of events, just. Both sisters wind up dying because
but they
goes off half-cocked.
Right, but they spend so little time with her that I don't feel that sense of tragedy.
Yeah, it's true.
Neither is
it's
Bond.
It's a weird thing. I feel like it was probably something that they inherited from the book. Again, I haven't read the book, but it feels like one of those things that was like in the book and they adapted it, and it's like it comes off as extra stuff because books are long.
Yeah. The thing you mentioned before about the Goldfinger's death, that was definitely very exciting to see, where you think the day is saved, but then turns out, Goldfinger's still out, and he tries, from what you've told me, he establishes that trope of the villain, the desperate villain, trying to get one last bit of victory on Bond, only to get their comeuppance at the very end. And the way he goes out was really cool, because that was something that was established early on, when Bond was held at gunpoint in another plane earlier in the film.
Now, I will say that trope, actually, now that I think about it, was present in From Russia with Love.
Ah, okay.
So this is actually the second time they had done that. But, yeah, that's a great scene. That's another example of classic Chekhov's gun, and this time it is a literal gun.
Yeah.
Because earlier in the film, Pussy Galore points her gun at James Bond while they're in the plane. And he says to her, "You obviously know more about planes than you do about guns." And he explains to her that firing that gun at close range is going to cause the plane to depressurize and they'll all be sucked out into space, yada, yada, yada. And then later on, that's exactly how Goldfinger goes out.
Yeah. I definitely did not see that coming. And,
what? Since we're kind of been dancing around it, what about Pussy Galore as a character? How do you feel about Pussy Galore?
See.
She begins a very, very long-running and pervasive Bond trope, which is the villainous woman who Bond convinces to turn to the light side through the power of his penis.
Yeah, that is very true. Let's see.
So yeah, Pussy Galore.
Oh, by the way, I'm just looking at this this little bit of trivia on Wikipedia right now. Let's see. During promotion, the actress Honor Blackman took delight in embarrassing interviewers by repeatedly mentioning the character's name. While the American censors did not interfere with the name in the film, they refused to allow the name Pussy Galore to appear on promotional material, and for the U.S. market, she was subsequently called Miss Galore, or Goldfinger's personal pilot. Okay, so even in 1964, people took issue with the fact that her name referenced the female reproductive organ. The female genitalia.
My name is Pussy Galore. I must be joking. That's like the third most famous.
You must be joking. No, I must be dreaming.
Sorry, I must be dreaming.
I probably would have said you must be joking.
Those are the three most famous scenes in this movie, and also like kind of in Bond history ever.
Yeah.
It's him finding Jill's body painted gold,
Yeah.
him in the laser trap,
Yeah.
and my name is Pussy Galore.
Right. She's definitely she didn't leave as much of an impact as the other characters did, like Oddjob and Bond and Goldfinger, but she was definitely she played her part extremely well. She came off as a very no-nonsense character, someone that could easily take care of herself in with an average fight, but not against someone like Bond.
She is a strong, independent woman. Don't need no man until James Bond comes around.
Exactly. Only a man as strong as Bond can convince her to come to the light side, as you said. But
if I'm remembering correctly, I think from what I've heard in the book, it's like implied that she's like lesbian, and that Bond lures her to the straight side.
Oh no! Oh no!
Because the penis my dear.
You can't do that today, Ian Fleming.
Yeah, the books are more problematic than the movies.
Oh no. Okay, but misogynistic overtones, I don't know. That stuff aside, she does come off as a very entertaining character. She works well as the sort of right-hand man or right-hand woman for Goldfinger. She does seem to... I love the twist that they did with her, where she seemingly is adhering to Goldfinger's plans before the last-minute reveal that she did not do as she was instructed to do. I thought it was a really cool, almost like comic booky thing that like she kind of like has this sort of public persona of being a stunt woman, or like a plain stunt woman, and that she leads a team of female stunt women that perform shows around the world. And so like while publicly she's known as a stunt woman, she has like far more skills. Obviously, it's kind of like a more than meets the eye sort of appearance with her and Oddjob, where they have these very simplistic, not mundane, but these simplistic jobs, but then they actually have like sort of ulterior motives and a whole other set of skills to help Goldfinger get what he wants. And for the most part, like, she is a villain throughout the majority of this movie, and she really plays it to a T. And she definitely comes off as a very intimidating person, and she puts up quite a fight against Bond, and it definitely took some convincing.
Some convincing. She comes across as a match for Bond in a lot of ways, in her wit, in her will, in her skills at judo.
Yes, that is very true.
But not in her skills at wrestling.
No. But yeah, that's pretty much what I think of her. And yeah, during the movie, I was thinking to myself, was the word pussy considered a very offensive term back in '64? And now looking here, apparently, yeah, it definitely was as offensive of a word, as dirty of a word back then as it is today.
Yeah, well, that's the whole joke behind her name. Mm-hmm. That's why the scene goes, "My name is Pussy Galore. Oh, I must be dreaming." It's a very tongue-in-cheek joke. They knew what they were doing.
Okay, not so. I feel like it's not so it's not so much in cheek, man. It's pretty on the nose there.
Tongue on nose, whatever. And that's how 30 years later, in Austin Powers and The Spy Who Shagged Me, we get characters like Ivana Hump-a-Lot.
And a lot of vagina.
A lot of vagina.
If we haven't been demonetized yet, we're definitely getting demonetized now.
And who can forget from Goldmember the classic Gwyneth Paltrow as Dixie Normus?
So yeah, anything else to discuss about this film? Oh, the location shootings. This movie goes all over the place into various locations, and just like looking at the visuals alone, it's a very beautiful film. Lots of wonderful locales. we went everywhere from, what was it, like from Kentucky to Sweden, I
At the
think.
beginning of the movie, he's in Miami, I believe.
Right, yeah, started in
the
Miami.
hotel.
Yeah.
And then we're in London briefly, of course, for the briefing scene. And then he's in, I think, Switzerland?
Yeah, I think, it was Switzerland, maybe.
And then the majority of the film after that takes place in Kentucky.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of a nice variety of backgrounds or environments for Bond and the rest of the characters to interact with, and so that just makes it that just makes the movie all the more visually captivating.
Yeah, the globetrotting element is something that varies from film to film. Some James Bond movies will take place almost entirely in one location. For example, Dr. No is mostly set in Jamaica. You Only Live Twice is mostly set in Japan. And then there are movies like Spectre, where it's like every 5 minutes I feel like we're in a different place. Like, what the fuck is going on?
It sounds a lot like what was it, The Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah, a little bit.
First, we gotta go here. We gotta go here to get the thing, so we can go over there and get the other thing, so we can go there to find the thing.
They fly now? Yeah.
They fly now.
Yeah.
And you give me shit for the gonorrhea joke in King of the Monsters.
Do I?
Yes, you do. Anyway.
But yeah. Spectre's better than Rise of Skywalker, though. Let's just put that out there.
I'll take
I don't want
to as the Bond guy. I'll take your word for it.
I don't particularly like Spectre. It's very middle of the road. It's better than Rise of Skywalker. Okay. It's maybe a little bit more boring because Rise of Skywalker is nothing if not entertaining, at least.
Right. At least, yeah. At least it's captivating in its random what the fuckery.
It may not make any sense that Palpatine's there, but he's having a good time.
Is he though, Dylan? Is he though?
I could watch Palps read the phone book, Andres.
I get you.
Sarah Connor.
Anything else we haven't mentioned yet?
I'm trying to think. We talked about the theme song. We talked about the characters.
The score. So, like, speaking of the theme song, I like the score here. I like the two motifs of both the Goldfinger song and the James Bond theme. Also, it's really funny just watching the original James Bond gun barrel intro in its like purity, because I've seen it parodied so many times that it's almost surreal to see it played straight this time around. I'm expecting a twist to come in because that's like the thing to do now whenever you parody that scene.
Everybody's done that. Jason Voorhees did it. Everybody's done the gun barrel.
Like, do you remember? Do you ever saw like the James Bond parody of American Dad, where like Stan Smith, he gets shot, and he's like, "Wait a minute, you're a gun barrel? I thought you were like a telescope or something."
Yeah. Yeah, I'll admit that when I was a kid, I was a little confused as to what that was supposed to be as well.
Right.
Am I looking down the lens of a camera? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, especially when he gets all bloody. So I'm like, oh, did he shot the guy in the eye or something?
Why he do that?
That's rather rude, wouldn't you say?
But no, you see, we, the viewer, were trying to murder him first.
Oh my god. But yeah, the music itself, I love it when a movie reuses a particular theme, like a motif, and they play variations of it to match the tone of the scenes that they are conveying. And so it was a very memorable score, and so it was such a, not only just visually spectacular, but also like I guess from a, how would you call it? Like from an audible. I'm not sure if audible is like the right word to go with visual, but the music and sound and everything else was also like top tier A material.
Yes, all very well done.
Let's see. So yeah, it looks like at this point we've gone on for about an hour and 18 minutes. So I think it's about time to wrap things up, man. So I gotta say,
Andres,
yes,
you fully endorse Goldfinger.
Absolutely, man. Much like with Enter the Dragon, you have shown me a classic piece of cinema that has every right to be referred to as a classic masterpiece of cinema. I can see it is a movie that, while it may not all of it holds up in 2020, it is certainly still to this day a very thrilling, very exciting, very exemplimentary, is that a real word? I don't know. Piece of artistic expression.
I think exemplary is the word you were looking for.
Thank you very much. An exemplary piece of art that deserves to be shown to future generations throughout the rest of time. It has shown me what the deal is with Bond, and now I understand how culturally significant and how I always knew he was a culturally significant character, and I'm very glad to understand why he is, and I got to see for myself just how entertaining of a character, of a premise, of a world that this movie embodies.
Yes, I also wanted to mention that this is the only movie of the Sean Connery era that isn't connected to the overall plot about James Bond fighting Spectre, which is a sort of multinational criminal organization run by Blofeld. Yada yada yada.
Okay.
It's the only movie of that. It's the only standalone movie that isn't connected to that story, and the reason is apparently they wanted to do Thunderball next, but apparently there was some kind of a legal issue with the rights to that book, and so they sort of filled time by doing Goldfinger first, even though, as I mentioned before, Goldfinger was like the 7th book in the series, so it didn't come until much later. So
this is essentially one big giant filler episode.
Exactly.
And yet it turns out to be the most debatably the most memorable of the franchise, and the most easiest for people like me to jump into.
Sometimes filler episodes are good. Sometimes filler episodes are Goku and Piccolo driving cars. And that's what Goldfinger is. It's the Goku and Piccolo driving cars of James Bond.
Thank God it's not the Garlic Jr. saga of Bond films.
How dare you, sir?
And I guess I know what your thoughts are on this movie, since you're the ones that originally fully endorsed it. But your overall thoughts on Goldfinger?
I love it. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. It's great. It's the quintessential Bond film. I think there are a couple different Bond films that you could use as like a gateway to this franchise. I could have just as easily shown you GoldenEye. Would have been a good one to sort of get you into the franchise. But I really wanted to go with a Connery film because of his recent passing.
Right. Yes. And he was, the world will truly miss him. And he was truly, there was no actor quite like him. He was a one of a kind, talented individual who we will surely miss, but his talent will forever be immortalized through the power of cinema.
Absolutely. And that one unfortunate Barbara Walters interview.
Dare I ask after this recording?
Oh, that's the one where the quote comes from, where it goes where she's like, you're quoted in I think it was like a Playboy article as saying that sometimes you need to hit a woman. Have you changed your position on that? And it's hilarious because he could tell that she was setting him up, and he just decided to go fuck you, and he goes, no, I haven't.
Well, no one's perfect. So next time.
You gotta respect the balls. The sheer balls.
So for next time, on episode 23 of Fully Endorsed, I will be recommending to Dylan another piece of media that I've already covered on this channel before, but it's one I'm excited to revisit for the second time since for the first time since originally reviewing it, that I'll be showing to Dylan, and that is the 12-episode anime SSSS.Gridman. which was an anime from 2018, coming up. We're coming up on like the second anniversary of the show's finale. The show lasted one season, although it's getting a follow-up next year, and will be airing on Toonami in January. So I feel like the time is right to introduce Dillion to something that many people would say was what the Godzilla anime trilogy should have been from the get-go, or even
Absolutely.
the Ultra.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited because the kaiju/tokusatsu community has never shut up about this fucking thing since it came out. So I'm excited to finally see it for myself.
Exactly. So I can't wait to introduce to you the world of SSSS.Gridman, and we'll see if you'll be fully endorsing it as much as I have. So until next time, everybody, I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
What do the 4 S's stand for? Do we know?
You'll find out later on, but at the moment, like, it's an in-joke to the fact that it's a reference to Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, which was the Power Rangers equivalent to the original Gridman show.
Right. Well, I know one of the S's doesn't stand for, and that's Super DM64, which is who I've been on this episode fully endorsed.
And until next time, everybody, take care.